Welcome to Talkin SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analysts around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to Talking SEC. It is Friday here on the podcast, and welcome in, and thank you for making a part of your day. Starting something new here on Fridays. Every Friday, I am going to be joined for the rest of college football season. I'll be joined by Matt Lowe from Lowe Sports, and we will be previewing the weekend's SEC games. Of course, this is week 7, so that is what you got going on today's episode of the podcast. We will break down Ole Miss, Auburn. We will look at even Vanderbilt, Georgia, the Alabama, Tennessee game, and much, much more in the SEC. You can check out Talking SEC on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. It means a lot to the show if you do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also watch the show over on YouTube, either at the Phillip Jordan YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and leave a comment on a video. I'll read that on a future edition of the show. Also over on the Talking SEC YouTube channel as well. You can always email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com or hit me up on social media at pjordansec. Everybody joining me today. It is Friday. We are about to hit into another college football weekend, and we're starting something new we're going to be doing each Friday here on Talking SEC. I will be joined by Matt Lowe, owner of lowdownsports.com. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to doing this once a week with you the rest of the season as we preview the SEC slate.
Yeah, Phillip, man, no problem, brother. I always enjoy talking football with you.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It is an interesting weekend of SEC football coming. We're at the midway point too, Matt. It does not feel like we should be this far along the season. It feels like we just started, but now we're halfway through the SEC football season.
Yeah, and it goes by fast, and there's still a lot of intrigue too within the SEC in particular, because there's still a lot of unknowns out there about how good some of these teams are. I do think, of course, Alabama and Georgia are the top 2 right now, but Tennessee could move up there to the top, or be right behind Georgia this weekend. And then, of course, you got teams like Mississippi State and Ole Miss lurking too. I mean, they're looking like pretty good teams. So we're going to find out who's for real or not over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into this weekend, I mean, like I said, this intro week, of course, we got the big Alabama-Tennessee game. That's the one everybody has circled for Saturday. But we got some pretty interesting and some intriguing storylines with all these games, I think, coming up this weekend. But what's the big theme for you going into this Saturday?
Well, I think it's of course, the Alabama-Tennessee game. I mean, that's I was writing something earlier. I mean, if Tennessee wins that game, they might set the world record for Uber drivers making trips back and forth, taking people home, because there's going to be a lot of people partying down after that one. But, I mean, you're seeing a lot of injuries too creep in to to play here. And, having a number 1 quarterback is important, sure. But, you're starting to see the backup quarterbacks come into play, and that's why I think it's very important to have depth at that position, which the transfer portal now it's a little tricky deal for coaches, having depth at that position and depth that's played. So that's important. And I think moving forward, I mean, injuries are coming into play. I mean, we saw KJ Jefferson didn't play last week because of the head injury that he had against Bama. And then, of course, Jalen Milroe got in, and Auburn's playing with a backup quarterback. And Texas A&M, Haynes King got back in after Max Johnson banged up, and then he got banged up. So, you got to have a quarterback. That's the most important position. And, when you get to second, third string quarterbacks, it can be a problem for teams.
Yeah, so let's kick off running through these games for Saturday. And we're going to go in order, everybody, except the Alabama-Tennessee game. That one will be the last game we'll preview and pick. But the only 11 o'clock game Saturday is Auburn at number 9 Ole Miss. Auburn 3-3. Matt, is this Brian Harson's last stand this Saturday? Because you depends on who you listen to. Some people say, well, they're going to wait till the season if they fire him. I've seen a lot of stuff too over the season too. If things went south after this game could be it, because Auburn goes into their bye week. I mean, Ole Miss is a really good team running the ball. Jackson Dart showed some great things throwing the ball against Vanderbilt last week for 448 yards, 3 touchdowns, and their defense is third in the SEC in points allowed and top 5 in other categories too as well. I see another tough game for Auburn. I mean, they can't run the ball. Robbie Ashford's running for his life. He's throwing way too much, in my opinion. What are your thoughts going into this one? Because, I mean, like I said, it does feel like this could be the last stand for Brian Harsin at Auburn.
Yeah, and Auburn just shoots themselves in the foot so much on offense. I mean, they'll get 8 or 9 yard gain, and then they get there's a penalty, and it's bad penalties like false starts. I mean, it's just it's bad football to watch. And what you said there with Ashford throwing the ball, I mean, I would think that they would want to run him more and do more option stuff and things like that with him. Because, I mean, he hasn't played a lot of football in 3 years, and I do think the kid's got a lot of upside. I think he's a great athlete. And, of course, he had a big game against LSU passing. But, I mean, I don't know what they do. I mean, it's really tough to see what kind of identity they have on the offensive side right now. And, of course, their defense is pretty good, but they can't play the whole game. I mean, you got to have balance. I mean, your offense has to help out your defense. And, questionable decision-making has been a problem with Auburn too, going forward on some 4th downs, stuff like that. But I'm going to say this about Ole Miss. I mean, they can really run the football. And Quinshon Judkins, who's one of the top backs in the SEC, he was an Alabama kid, and I think he wanted to go to Auburn. And they didn't have a spot for him. And Zach Evans is a TCU transfer. I mean, that's a dynamic duo. And what Lane has done, when they had Matt Corral, they threw the ball a good bit. And now they got Jackson Dart and they got this running game, and their offense is built around running the ball. And one of the top teams in the country in doing that. And Jackson Dart can throw it too, though, when they need to. So I don't know. Auburn for Auburn, even I think to have a shot at winning this game, they're going to need to have less than 2 or 3 penalties. I mean, they're going to need to get some turnovers, and they're going to need to score at least 27 points. And I just don't see that happening. I really don't. And you reference Harsin. Is this going to be the game? I mean, you go back and if last year, if Auburn wouldn't have blown a 28-point lead to Mississippi State, if they would have beaten the South Carolina, if they would have beaten Alabama, and look, there was bad decision-making towards the end of that game that resulted. And then, if they made a won the bowl game or beaten LSU 2 weeks ago, I think there wouldn't be so much pressure on Harsin, and the talk wouldn't be so loud about him losing his job. But if they get boat race in Oxford Saturday, yeah, I think that could be his last game, sure.
Yeah, that's kind of seems like where it's been headed. On Ashford too, I kind of wonder if maybe they don't run him as much because they don't have anything behind him. Because Garner showed he's not ready. Then you have a walk on. I mean, TJ Finley is still hurt. I mean, and Calzada is out with the shoulder. I kind of wonder if they're just scared if Robbie Ashford gets hurt. I mean, he almost got himself hurt against Missouri blocking. So that's kind of, and I'm with you. I just don't think they can score enough points. The offense is just not there. I think the defense will play a great first half against Georgia because they still playing hard. That's one thing that's good about them. I mean, all the negativity, this team is still playing hard, but I agree with you. I just don't, it's going to be tough on Saturday for them.
Yeah, and I think the tempo too is going to affect Auburn. I mean, because they don't have a lot of quality depth. I mean, so I think after a while, as 3rd quarter or 4th quarter rolls around, if the defense has been playing the whole game, I think it could snowball on them. I mean, and Ole Miss, their defense is pretty good too. They play hard on defense, and that's just. I mean, I thought Kentucky kind of gave the game to them a couple of weeks ago. A lot of miscues on special teams, but that was a back and forth game, And Ole Miss's defense is pretty good too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think Ole Miss will win this game, 38-17, something like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. Won't spend too much time on this one. I think we both know where we would pick on this one. But Vanderbilt 3-3 at number 1 Georgia, who is 6-0, 230 SEC Network. Georgia's 38-point favorite. I mean, I obviously going to go with Georgia here on my end. I'm pretty sure you are too. But I'll say this: Georgia still looks like they're kind of sluggish offensively at times. But I'm also going to say this about Vanderbilt. I think Clark Lee has them going in a good direction. I've been very impressed with quarterback A.J. Swan. Vanderbilt's not really embarrassing themselves out there. They're not like it was the last 2 years. But, I mean, obviously, I'm going to have to go with Georgia on this one.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, and the thing with Georgia, their passing game looks like it's taking a step backward. And I don't know if that's timing or whatnot. Just Stetson Bennett, it just seems like they're a tad bit off. And I know they've had some injuries to some of their top receivers. So I think 1 or 2 of those guys are coming back this week. So, but I mean, I think Georgia's fine. Their running game is just too powerful. I mean, but I'm with you. I think Clark Lee is doing a good job at Vanderbilt. The Swan kid, and they got a true freshman wideout. He's pretty good. So that looks like a nice little 1-2 punch there at quarterback and receiver. And they got some young guys playing on defense. So, I mean, at least they're hanging around in games, and putting up points. But yeah, I think this is no contest. I see Georgia rolling. I mean, just like they have over this team in the last few years. I'll say 38-10.
Okay, so they're not going to hit the 38 on the spread there that they got listed out.
I don't know. I mean, who's Georgia play next week? They let's see.
They're off. I think. Yeah, they're off next week.
They're off next week. Well, yeah, is the line's 38.
Yeah.
Woo, I think Vandy covers up.
Yeah, I do too. And they played well in the first half against Ole Miss last week. I mean, they're up by 10 twice. I mean, and then the second half, just Ole Miss got rolling on offense, and Jackson Dart, like I said, had to be game there with them. But yeah, so I'm with you on that one. I don't think Georgia beats them by 38. I'm probably about a 35. I'm around the same score as you, around that, that 35-10, somewhere in there. Vandy probably, respectable performance by them going to Georgia. This next one, and you brought up KJ Jefferson earlier. Arkansas is playing. They're at 3-3. They've lost 3 in a row. They're playing BYU, who's 4-2. I know they beat Baylor early in the year, but they have had some losses here lately. They lost to Oregon. They lost to Notre Dame previously. Looks like KJ Jefferson will be back from all the comments that Sam Pittman gave earlier in this week. But their defense, I mean, KJ Jefferson's going to do a lot because BYU can put some points up. They've got a solid quarterback in Jaron Hall, who's 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I'm just kind of surprised, though, how Arkansas has not been better defensively just because who they have. Bumper Pool, Drew Sanders, even Jordan Dominic in the secondary. I mean, not in the secondary, Dwight McLaughlin in the secondary. And then you got Jordan Dominic there also with 4.5 sacks. He's 3rd in the conference. Drew Sanders, number 1, with 6.5. Bumper Pool, 60 tackles, 60 in the SEC. I've just been really surprised this year that Barry Odom defense has not been better than what they have been.
Yeah, and they've had some key injuries in the secondary too. I mean, and that's when you're playing Catalone and Ladari, and their Miles Slusher, their nickelback, didn't play last week, so that was a big loss. But yeah, man, I mean, when you're playing a team like Alabama or Mississippi State that can really throw the ball around, that's where their issues are. I mean, they're pretty decent at stopping the run, but I'm with you though. If he can't go, I think that's an uphill battle in Provo. I mean, that's that high altitude out there that usually gets to teams. And BYU's a pretty good outfit, and they always play good at home. But so, I mean, the prediction on that game would be if KJ Jefferson plays. If he doesn't, I give the edge to BYU. I still think Arkansas is going to be an uphill battle in that game, just because BYU can't throw the ball.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Arkansas. I think it's close. I think Arkansas wins like a high scoring, like 35-31 type of football game, because it especially like I said, if KJ Jefferson is playing. And man, I turn around and handed Rocket Sanders first in the SEC rushing. He's got 5 touchdowns on here. He only had 5 all of last year, which I know he wasn't the starter last year. I'd lean on that running game, and kind of if you're worried about BYU, same with BYU, just because how that operation works, they're always a veteran team. So playing a big team like an Arkansas not going to intimidate them because they're an older group. I mean, they're one of the oldest. They probably are the oldest team in college football. So that's a factor too. They're a more mature group. So a big game like this is probably not going to phase them either.
Yeah, I mean, and BYU's always never been afraid to play people. Mm-hmm. So and they are experienced bunch. And like I said, if KJ can't, that's the wild card to me. If he can't play, then I don't think they have a chance. I really don't, because I mean, I just see too many holes on Arkansas's defense right now. And I was reading some quotes from Sam Pittman that they're really banged up, and they could use a bye week, but they can't get it this week, so they're going to play. I'm going to go BYU in the upset here. I say BYU 37, Arkansas 30.
Okay, all right. I was waiting to see when we had different opinions on that. Matt, it gets boring when both of the people picking the games pick the exact same ones all the way through. Like on game day, you don't ever want to see them guys picking the same ones all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, one game I'm excited. I think this is going to be a fun game, and it's a big game for both teams. That's LSU and Florida. Both teams are 4-2 coming in this one. It's a 6:00 game over on ESPN. Florida's listed as a 2.5-point favorite when we're recording this. Of course, LSU coming off that bad 40-13, and I think Brian Kelly made a few bad decisions in that first half. One, unfortunately, the fumbled kickoff, but then some of the fourth down decisions, especially the 4th and 10 right before halftime. I really thought that took any momentum away from them. And then Florida, I tell you, outside of the Utah game, in the Tennessee game, Anthony Richardson's been very hot or cold. I know last week against Missouri, only 66 yards passing. They really had to lean on the run game, and he's turned the ball over 5 straight games. I'm leaning LSU here. I think LSU still is the better team. Jaden Daniels has played well at times this year. He's their lead. Obviously, he good passing, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. Doesn't push the ball down the field probably enough. And then he's their leading rusher. I want to see Kayshon Boutte finally look like the All-American. I want to see him get him the ball. I don't know what's going on there. So I'm going to go with LSU to win probably like 27-24. I think it's going to be a close game. What's your thoughts on these two teams?
Well, LSU's had problems stopping the run, this year. And I think Florida ran for almost 300 yards last week. I'm with you on Richardson, though. He still has some flaws as a quarterback, and there's some things like we've talked about before, and I've always said is you can't just fix a quarterback's accuracy. That's just something that's a God-given gift, and he's got all the ability in the world, and sometimes I'm confused of what Florida is on offense, because against Tennessee, Richardson kind of led them back to in the game passing, and then against Kentucky, he looked terrible. And then last week against Missouri, which Missouri could easily be 3-0. I mean, Brady Cook threw two interceptions last week, and one was returned for a touchdown. So, I don't know. I don't know. I can't get a read on this Florida team. They're tough to get a read, but it is at night and it's in the swamp. So I will take the Gators. And I think this is going to be a defensive game. I say something like 24-20 Florida.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like Florida's played all their games at home this year. Yeah. I don't know. It's just like, do they ever get out of the state of Florida? But the South Florida game, I mean, they were lucky to win that one. Because the way that game ended, the kicker for South Florida, and I forget his name, it's off my head, he almost made a field goal on a bad snap. I mean, he just kicked it off the ground basically. I was like, man, if that thing been good, he would have made it. But yeah, it's just for Florida, and I'm shocked LSU's not better against the run this season because they've got dudes on that front. They've got guys who we know are going to play at the next level. It's just, how would you grade year one for both these coaches so far this year? Because Brian Kelly, I feel like he's one of the best coaches in college football. I don't think he gets respected the way that he should, because if we look at the blowout losses in the playoffs when he was at Notre Dame. Billy Napier, I think, is doing some good things at Florida as well. Got him in the right direction. Just with Richardson, he just needs more development. But how would you grade Brian Kelly and Billy Napier so far.
Well, LSU, I can't remember his name. They lost their big-time defensive tackle in that FSU game. He was jumping up and down celebrating and hurt his knee. And you hit something about the decision-making. I don't know what in the heck is going on with some of these coaches' decision-makings, whether it's going for 2 and you can kick a field goal to cut a lead to 10, or going for 4th and 10, or going for – going for two. I don't, and it's happened in the NFL too. I don't understand just some of the decision making of these coaches. And the Phillip, we're hearing the word analytics. Like, dude, we ain't playing baseball. I mean, where are these analytic guys coming from? Harvard and Yale? I mean, I don't get it, man. It makes no sense to me what some of these coaches are doing. It's like everybody's, forgot just, hey, a common sense move. And when you start chasing points, it always seems like those decisions come back and bite teams at the end of games. But I would give Napier if I was grading him, I'd probably say a B. And the reason why I say that is the Tennessee game. I mean, going for 2 points twice when he could have kicked the extra point, and then at the end of the game, they could have had a shot at a game-time field goal. Brian Kelly, I would say a C right now with him, just because, like some of the decision-making the last week against Tennessee. And look, Tennessee's good. So, and the thing about when you play a high-powered offense like that, and and Napier kind of did this too. He's like, they went for it on 4th down. They went for 2. Like, it puts pressure on the other team to, like, hey, man, we got to keep up scoring with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Where at the same time, I think sometimes you get in trouble by doing that. Well, just not being patient and letting your team just stay in the game and fight with them. I mean, go toe-to-toe. You are Florida. You are LSU. But, I mean, LSU should have lost to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
They should have. I mean, period. And so, B.J. Ojulari is a great player for LSU, and he's made some game-changing plays for them. But to your point, I mean, I would give Napier a B and Kelly a C to this point in the season.
Yeah, it's been, like I said, with him, like I said, Auburn pretty much gift wrapped him that win a few weeks ago with all the second half. I mean, that's kind of the story of the Brian Harsin era, is bad second halves. And that guy, and I was drawing a blank too on the player's name. Mason Smith was the guy that got hurt for LSU that first game.
Big time player.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting defensive end, guy had, our defense tackle, and had NFL wrote all over him, and hopefully, that doesn't hurt him in that aspect there. But he is a sophomore, so should be seeing him for the LSU Tigers again next year. Mississippi State and Kentucky. Now we get to the 2 games with the 2, that are both featuring both teams are ranked. Mississippi State's good. I mean, they are. I mean, it's not everybody. It's all about Will Rogers, and I think he's one of the most underrated, underappreciated players in the SEC. We'll talk about Bryce Young, Hendon Hooker, Will Levis. Who we'll see if he's in this game. He's listed on the depth chart as QB1. I know Stoops said earlier in the week he was day-to-day, so we'll see if he will be playing Saturday. They need him in this game, but Mississippi State's good on defense too. I mean, they're not going to be high up in the numbers in the SEC when it comes to rankings, but they only give up 21 points a game and running the ball. I mean, Mike Leach teams don't run the ball. His does. This one does. Dylan Johnson had over 100 yards last week. So this is a huge game for Kentucky, but this is also a game I think Mississippi State comes out and wins this one. It's a big statement too for them. So this is an intrigue. I think it's a close game. I've struggled with this one, thinking about this game today. I think I'm going to lean Mississippi State here. I think they're going to pull it off and beat Kentucky and go to 6-1. What's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I liked Mississippi State the way they were playing last year, and if it wasn't for a couple of bonehead calls by Mike Leach against LSU and the muff punt inside the 10, I think they probably get them, and they're undefeated. Mm-hmm. So their defense is aggressive. Emmanuel Forbes is one of the best cornerbacks in the country. Nathaniel Watson's a good player. Their linebackers are talented and rugged. They attack on defense. And like you said, they're running the ball. I mean, and they can throw it. And that's when you have balance like that, and you got to have balance like that to be a really good team in the SEC. You know, you can't just do one or the other, you know, and that's the thing. You look at some of these teams, they just don't have a lot of balance. And, but, you know, the receiver, Caleb Ducking's a receiver that's a big time player for Mississippi State. He's got NFL written all over him. He's got 7 touchdowns. You know, Ra Thomas is averaging 17.5 yards a catch. He's a big time player. So they can beat you in multiple ways. I think a couple of weeks ago against Arkansas, they blocked a kick and ran it back for a score. Excuse me, that was against Texas A&M. My bad. So, you know, they can beat you in a lot of ways. And it's funny. I was talking to my dad about this earlier, and he was like, son, Mississippi State's pretty good. I was like, yeah, they are good. But you always got to watch out over the years on Mike Leach. He always has that one or two games during the season where you just don't know what he's thinking. But they're a dangerous team, and I think they can beat anybody if they're especially if they're hot on offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I'll be honest with you, there's part of me always roots for Mississippi State to win because I want to see what kind of question they're going to ask Mike Leach after the game to see what kind of answer we're going to get. See, we've so far gotten this year, we've gotten coffee opinions and wedding advice. So there's no telling if they beat Kentucky what kind of question he's going to get asked. So who do you like in this one between Kentucky
Well,
and
I mean, Will Levis is just we saw last week how much he means to that team as far as just being a leader. I mean, and once again, you go from having your star quarterback, potential top 10 NFL pick to a guy that's never played, you know, really. So there's a big difference in that, man. You know, it's a big difference. And so I don't think Kentucky has a shot without him. I mean, I really don't. And I like Mississippi State anyway to go in there and get a win. I mean, I think Mississippi State's a legit football team. So I'll go Mississippi State 34, Kentucky 23.
Yeah, I think they're going to put up some points in this one. And you know what? Kentucky's not good at protecting the passer. They have given up a lot of sacks this year. I believe they gave up 6 last week against South Carolina. And then Will Levis was getting hit a lot too. I mean, look at the end of the Ole Miss game. I mean,
yes,
the fumbles. If he got hit and fumbled the ball, I mean, the offensive line, the Kentucky offensive line is not up to their normal standard this season. And they've also struggled getting a running and going. Chris Rodriguez is stubborn, and he's going to get yards because he's so good of a running back. But before he came back, the other running backs weren't playing well because I don't think the Kentucky offensive line is as good as they have been. So I think that'll be a big thing too. As talked about, Mississippi State's defense is pretty good too, and it's an underrated unit too. Lastly, Alabama and Tennessee. It feels so good that this game means something again. For the longest, this was the big rivalry in the SEC. I mean, when you look at the history of the SEC, probably the second most successful program probably is Tennessee. How many times they've beaten Alabama in their history, just where they've been. I mean, it was a long time ago. They were at Alabama's level with what they did, and this team is good. And we all talk about Hendon Hooker, how good he is for that quarterback, and he is good. He does not turn the ball over. He has not thrown an interception this year. 7% passer. He's ran for 6 touchdowns, but they could run the ball with the other guys as well with Wright and Smith. Cedric Tillman could be back this week. Brew McCoy's played well. And defensively, no, the yardage, they give up a lot of yardage, but they sack the quarterback 14 times, and they give up less than 18 points per game. But we all know, Matt, the storyline going in this, will Bryce Young play? I don't think Alabama has a chance if Bryce Young doesn't play. Jalen Milroe going into that environment Saturday in Knoxville, I don't think he's going to be ready for it. Then you're going to need Bryce Young in this one. So I'm going to just say this. If Bryce Young plays, I believe Alabama wins a very good, probably a lot of points were going to be scored between these two quarterbacks. I know Alabama's got a good defense. So I'm going to say that this. I think Bryce Young does play. I think Alabama wins the game 38-35.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Bryce Young that I think people need to consider is this is his kid's right arm.
Mm-hmm.
This is his future. Millions of dollars. So
sure.
That's a tough decision to make, and that's one that he's going to have to make. And I'm with you. I agree with you, but I don't know. So we don't know. I don't know the severity of it. None of us do, I don't think. I mean, and that's your throwing arm. I mean, that's $1 million arm, no pun intended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so there's a lot of variables there with that. And we showed, as good as Jalen Milroe looked against Arkansas and as talented as he is, that was his first college start. And it looks, I think in these guys too, they get in there and they want to do so good for the team, where sometimes they make bad decisions like holding on to the ball or whatnot too long. And, it's just a different. I mean, I'm going to say this, Texas A&M's defensive front, they're young, but they're talented.
Oh yeah. They're really
Those
good.
Guys are talented, man. And so they're going to be a force to reckon with as the season goes on, because they're only going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up, if Young plays, I think that's a different dynamic. But if he doesn't, I think Tennessee wins the game. I mean, you got to give the edge to Tennessee just because. I mean, I've said this over the years, is like when you in a big game, who has the best quarterback? That's what it comes down. But Tennessee's offensive line's good. They can move people and they protect well. And that Tennessee offense, they get plays off fast. And an offense like that is always giving Bama problems that runs and warp speed. You mentioned Cedric Tillman. I think he's the best wide receiver in America when he's on the field. He's a big kid. He can go up and get it. He runs great routes. Him and Hooker just have a great relationship together, which is very important with a quarterback, receiver combo. I think Tennessee is getting better on defense. They got a couple of young linebackers that are pretty good. Their secondary can be had, though, now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Bryce Young comes into play. Jalen Milroe in, I don't see it. Bryce Young, because he can chunk it. But Alabama's protection at times has broken down this year too, against good competition. And you mentioned it. Tennessee can get up, can sack the quarterback. And here's another thing too, that when you have an offense that can score like Tennessee can, and just say on the first possession, you drive down the field and score. Okay. Next possession, the team goes 3 and out. You drive down the field and score. It's 14-0, just like that. And what I talked about with Brian Kelly and Billy Napier, all of a sudden as a coach, you're like, man, we got to score. We got to try to score every time we have the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get in that mentality too, you make decisions as a coach you probably wouldn't make. Whereas, so it takes a lot of discipline to stay within your game plan. Be like, hey, we don't need to panic. They did this, but let's stick with what we came in here to do instead of just getting out of your game plan. And the Indianapolis Colts, when they had Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne and all those, Dallas Clark, that's what I saw them do that to teams so many times. And I know that's the NFL, but it's still the same concept on offense.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And you have guys like Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney coming off the edge because other teams are like, all right, we got to pass you back in the game. You feed right back in. You feed right into what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And you're just in pass mode. And that way, defense are like, okay, they're one-dimensional. I can come get them. Now it's hey, defensive ends, linebackers, go eat, and that's the caliber and type of team this Tennessee team is, and it's what they can do to opposing coaches. So it's a different dynamic with them. And if Tillman comes back, and I think he had surgery on his ankle, that'll just vault them to me. I don't know. Because in today's college football, you win on offense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need having a defense like Georgia's defense last year, you can win with that too, sure. But you need to score points. And Brew McCoy's the guy that stepped in, USC transfer for them at wide receiver. Jalen Hyatt has stepped up and really did a good job, and they can run the ball and they have balance. So, and dude, that crowd up there is going to be off the chain. I mean, you got to think 15-year-old Vols fan driving around with his mom and this Acura. You know, he wasn't even alive the last time Tennessee beat Alabama.
I know. 2006, Arian Foster.
That's a long flipping time, man. And if they went up there, Uber's going to set a world record for the amount of money they take driving drunk people back home to their houses. So it's going to be a madhouse. I think Tennessee gets it done no matter who plays the quarterback. I think if Bryce Young plays, yeah, Bama's got a shot. And Bama historically, you know, coming off a bad game and everybody's dogging them in the media, they usually come out and they put together a pretty good showing. You know, and especially, you know, all the talk surrounding Tennessee and how bad they played last week, and Bill O'Brien should be fired. What? I mean, the dude was making his first start. I mean, you can't just not run your offense because the guy's making his first start. I mean, and Bama fans are just used to playing perfect all the time, and it just doesn't work that way every game. You know, but I like Tennessee. If with Milroe, I say by 10 to 14 points. With Young, I say they win by 4 to 7 points in a high scoring game.
Yeah, I think it's going to take whoever wins a lot of points. They win this game. Alabama's got the guys on defense, I know, but this is a different kind of offense. And I don't know how much this is getting paid attention to. When Tennessee went to Tuscaloosa last year, that game was a one-score game going into the fourth quarter. I think Hendon Hooker threw an interception. Alabama took a lot of momentum. They went up by 2 scores, and then they kind of pulled away there in the fourth quarter. I think they won by 21, 28 points in that one, just going off the top of my head. So that's the thing, too. I think Tennessee's probably thinking, look, we played with them for 3 quarters in Tuscaloosa. We can beat this team if we just don't make the mistake. They made a mistake in that one, and Alabama pulled away. So I think that's one thing to look at.
I remember that game because I was at the beach sitting in a hot tub watching it, drinking cold beer. And that's when I said, hey, you know what? Tennessee's is about to be for real.
Yeah.
That game right there kind of convinced me because I saw Hooker and Tillman and those dudes throwing the ball at each other. I was like, this little combo right here is going to be nasty. And that did it for me right there. And you know, yeah, you're right. I mean, because they were right, and I think they lost by 28 because the spread was like 28 or something, 27 something points. And I still, to this day, don't know how Bama did it. But yeah, they were right there in that game and playing Bama tit for tat, you know, going back and forth with them. And they're not going to be intimidated by Alabama this year.
They are not. They are not. It's going to be a fun week 7, Matt. This was fun. The first installment of me and you doing this on Fridays, picking at all the SEC games coming up. But before we get out of here, before I let you go, where can people find you online? Or how can they check out Lowdown Sports?
Yeah, go to lowdownsports.com. I got this week's SEC rankings. I moved teams up and down per weekly. I'm also contributing to Field Level Media, covering some Atlanta Falcons stuff and doing some other stuff with them. So they're fieldlevelmedia.com. But yeah, and I do my lowdown. I do my own predictions on pretty much the top 25, the big games around the country each week. And I'm picking up steam there. I'm starting to figure out some of these teams. And my upsets of the week, I had UCLA last week upsetting Utah, which Chip Kelly, look out for those boys out there. He looks like he's got a little thing going on. So I'm doing pretty well there on the pick. So yeah, I usually put that up on Friday. That'll probably go up tomorrow though this week. So lowdownsports.com.
All right, everybody, go check out Matt. Go check out the website. And Matt, we'll do this again next week. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
No problem, brother. Talk to you soon, man. Go Braves.
All right, and once again, thanks to Matt Lowe for coming on today. And this will be a weekly installment. Me and Matt previewing and predicting the SEC games for that upcoming week. We're going to be doing that rest of the season here on Talking SEC. And that's going to do it for this edition. And go check out Matt's work over at lowdownsports.com as well. Does a great job covering all sorts of great sports stuff. A lot of college football, as we talked about there. Has some Atlanta Braves. Also go check out, with Field Level Media, where he's doing the Atlanta Falcons stuff as well. So go and check that out. Also check out, if you're in the Southeast Alabama area, the Wiregrass High School Football Report, my high school football podcast I do once a week. With 96.9 The Legend, of course, doing a dozen Wolves High football games too as well. And for people wondering, okay, we brought Talkin SEC back this week, but the Phil Jordan Show is still a thing. Once a week, talking just whatever sports stuff is on my mind that week, anything. So I had the Troy Trojans on my mind this past week, so we talked about that with Josh Boutwell from Troy Messenger. We'll be talking some more Troy football next week, because next Thursday night is the big battle for the belt. Troy will be traveling to Mobile to play South Alabama. That is a big game in South Alabama between those two teams, and they will be playing next Thursday nationally televised game. So next week, just stay tuned on the Phillip Jordan Show. I'll be joined by the voice of the Troy Trojans, Barry McKnight, and I'll be joined by the voice of South Alabama, J.D. Byers. So looking forward to that. We'll be getting the rivalry from both sides. But next week on Talkin SEC, got some pretty cool guests lined up. I will go ahead and say on Tuesday, Coach Max Howell will be joining me on the show. And, of course, Matt will be on next Friday. And I've got some pretty cool guests trying to get lined up for next week's shows. Now, Monday, we'll be back. It'll be just me and you guys. Just me and you guys talking about what happened in the SEC this upcoming weekend. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can check out the show on 2 different YouTube channels. My personal one, Phillip Jordan. Just check that out. Also, the Talkin SEC YouTube channel. Either one, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for all notifications. If you leave a comment on a video, I will read that on a future edition of the show as well. And you can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy the football. I am Phillip Jordan, and you've been listening to Talkin SEC.
Thank you for listening to Talkin SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.